For the last couple of months, we have been playing a Napoleonic miniatures game called Valour Fortitude. This is a new set of rules written by Jarvis Johnson in cooperation with the Perry Brothers. The rules are available for free on the Perry Brothers Company site. We played several games and then have heavily modified the rules to bring it more into our view of how the game should work to represent Napoleonic combat. This latest game is a refight of the Battle of Vimeirio in August 28, 1808. We are using a scenario from the excellent books by Michael Hooper. I have taken a few liberties with the scenario to force the Anglo-Portuguese force to have to redeploy. This photograph is showing the battlefield from the eastern edge, with Wellesley's army deploying. This is the scene at the end of turn 1. Several British brigades are marching to the east to stop the French from outflanking the Allied left flank. Notice at the end of turn 1, there are no French troops on the table. The end of turn 2, Glenn is commanding the British column moving to the east or the left flank. The first of the French troops have arrived at the top of the screen on the right. These belong to Herb. At the end of turn 3, we have the rest of the French infantry division under Herb's command showing up, and the British column continuing to move to the Allied left. On turn 4, Herb's brigades have started advancing forward. 2 more French brigades have entered on Herb's right, with another brigade on the far French right. Glenn has halted his column and started deploying to meet this challenge. Turn 5 has ended. Herb has advanced into long range of the British forces south of Vimeirio. To Herb's right, the French brigades are advancing towards Glenn's deploying column. These French brigades are joined by a French dragoon brigade. These brigades are commanded by Mike. On the eastern edge of the field, a French formation under Bill is trying to outflank the Allies. Glenn has been ordered by Wellesley, played by Bob, to withdraw, and Glenn has pulled his advanced Highlander battalion back into the rough terrain near the steep incline. On the 6th turn, we have the first heavy casualty suffered in the game. Herb's left-hand battalion of French line infantry took heavy fire, and then they broke and ran. Calvin, who is in command of the British brigades around Vimeirio and on the hill to the immediate south, has advanced the 95th Rifles through an infantry battalion that had fired at the skirmished French light infantry. He was also responsible for breaking the French battalion of line. On the far right, the Allied army has finally gotten their cavalry brigade operating. They had had several delays in taking commands. North of Vimeirio is a steep hill which had another British brigade in reserve. They have come down the steep slope. These troops in the cavalry brigade are under Bob's command. On the Allied left, the Highlanders have turned around and placed themselves into a firing line to receive the French light troops deployed in open formation. These troops are uphill and to their front and right flank. The last brigade of the British column has advanced to the left of the Highlanders, but in the valley below the steep slopes. In turn 7, we have the first close combat for the game when Bill leads his light infantry and columns of line troops into Glenn's Highlanders. The Highlanders had already suffered from the French fire, but the concentrated attack breaks the battalion. Earlier during the turn, on the far Allied left, a brigade of Portuguese and a brigade of British and Highlanders have marched to the guns. These troops are under the command of Lloyd. They had been given an order to attack the small village of Vertosa at the top left of the field. Their commanders tried to meet this demand and yet offer battle to the French on their right. The cazadores of the Portuguese brigade are in open order, advancing on the French light infantry from behind. You can see the gap in Glenn's line from the routed Highlanders, but his other brigade is moving up to attack the steep slopes. The French dragoons are massing in the center of the battlefield. And over on the far right of the field, Calvin and Bob have pressed the French troops under Herb to withdraw. Mike is bringing his converged grenadier battalions to that area to try to stabilize it. Turn 8 sees more close combat as Calvin's forces push up the slopes after one of Herb's brigades. However, Mike is getting into position on either side of Herb's brigade with his converged grenadiers. Also on the Allied left, Glenn has attacked with his 3rd Brigade on his right flank, while his other brigade on his left flank is struggling up the sharp slope to attack the French light infantry deployed at the top. The same French lights have just received a charge into their rear from the Portuguese light troops. Both units are trained for this type of combat. Both are in open order and using the crevices and washes to their advantage. At the end of the turn, Herb's lead infantry battalion is routed, making his 2nd Brigade wavering on the edge of being shattered. On the other side of the field, Glenn's right brigade destroys the Leger unit to its front, which was in open order. The French light infantry have stayed in the fight, though shaken by the combination of earlier shooting by the Highlanders and the assault on their rear by the Portuguese caçadores. The French dragoons have been ordered to change direction and are now heading towards the new troops on the British left flank. Turn 9 sees even more close combat. On the western end of the field, Calvin's assault continues against the French. Herb's exhausted brigades are both withdrawing, covered by their artillery companies, though hard-pressed by British and Portuguese light dragoons. Mike's grenadiers are under assault by Calvin's troops after Herb's troops had left the field. And on the other side of the field, Glenn's battalions close on the shaken French Leger, one battalion struggling up the slope but another throwing themselves against the shaken Frenchmen. However, a French column manages to attack the caçadores on the flank, peeling them off the shaken Leger. Seeing the need for glory, the French brigade commander throws his last unit against a Portuguese line battalion. Another Portuguese battalion has formed square to cover the brigade's left flank from the French dragoons. They have taken a beating from French artillery and skirmishers. Over on the far left, the leftmost British brigade has formed line abreast and marched straight at the French dragoons. The dragoons have moved up to attack. At the end of turn 9, Calvin has hurt Mike's grenadiers, Glenn has destroyed Bill's Leger, and Lloyd's Portuguese caçadores stopped the French column, and the line infantry caused the other French line unit to become shaken. With the loss of the Leger and the shaken line unit, the brigade is shattered. This routs the line unit that was attacking the Portuguese line and places the other French line unit that was in column in danger of itself being outflanked. Turn 10 on the west end of the field. The grenadiers are holding but are being swarmed by numbers. The British cavalry have cornered several French units but may have bitten off more than they can handle. On the far east end, the Highlanders fired and staggered a French dragoon regiment. The other 2 dragoons have charged the British and Highlander lines in turn. The small battalion of Swiss has moved to fire at the Portuguese square, and 2 large French columns attack the shaken Portuguese line, though this opened up their flank to an attack. At the end of the turn, a grenadier battalion is broken. The shaken Portuguese line battalion and the British line battalion are both routed. The Highlanders did stop the dragoon charge. The remainder of the French brigade that led the attack on this flank is limping away. It is turn 11, and the Highlanders on the east combat area have successfully formed square after holding off the dragoon attack. The victorious dragoons rally and prepare to attack the Highlanders next turn. The shaken dragoon regiment has turned to face Glenn's advancing right flank brigade. One of the French columns is attacked on their flank, the other is attacked from the front by the Portuguese line, with the Swiss closing with the Portuguese square before it can form line. On the west end of the battlefield, an isolated grenadier battalion is outflanked by a battalion of the 95th Rifles. Another grenadier is swarmed by British line units, with the last battalion of converged grenadiers forming line to fend off an attacking brigade of British. A French square and an artillery unit rout the Portuguese cavalry, while the British light dragoons overrun a limbered artillery company. With turn 11 ended, the Grenadier Brigade is shattered, with its forces surrendering or running for safety. The British light dragoons have overrun the battery, and the rest of the French are withdrawing from the battlefield with all hope lost. On the east end of the field, the Highlanders break the dragoons that were left milling around them, but the Highlanders are shaken and looking at another worn but game dragoon regiment. The shaken dragoon regiment is looking at fresh enemy infantry advancing towards them. The Portuguese brigade has lost another of its battalions, however, it has stayed in the fight, as has the French brigade, which was outflanked. At this point in the game, the French players had all conceded the game as being lost. The British did not win overwhelmingly, but they had won. They had held the position and had done a great deal of damage to the French. They had taken some damage themselves, but not as much as the French had. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed the video. Goodbye.